Of course, I remain your presenter, Hakeem Akitunde. It's been a wonderful time we've been having since the program started. Of course, you saw the key segment of the program. You also saw the lead pastor of the Victory Life Bible Church, Pastor Lawrence Achudine, on my Saturday, where we normally talk to people on how they spend their typical Saturday. Style Plus was also on. Call My Name, that's the music you enjoyed, and just now you saw the makeup and beauty segment as facial massage as handled by Eva coordinator there and presenter. That was a lovely one for women. That's a session the women will always look towards every time of the program. We'll still continue with the program as we are on to the personality segment of the program, where I have in-house with me to look at some issues, and especially this book that she has just written. It is e-book, so to say. Of course, she'll tell us more about that, and how you can grab a copy online. Let me welcome Mrs. Tayo Agunbiade to the program. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Of course, for those of you who are wondering which Tayo Agunbiade is, yes, it's still the same Tayo Agunbiade, the former special assistant information to Governor Gbenga Daniel, then almost 10 years ago.
Yes,
and
true.
Of course now a writer and gender analyst. Once again, I want to welcome you to the program.
Thank you.
Let
Hakeem.
me start with the issue of being a gender analyst. What are we talking about here?
Well, when you're a gender analyst, you look at issues through the eyes of through a gender lens. You know, you look at how does this issue affect men? How does it affect women? Take politics, for instance. If I was to look at, if I was to say what is going on in our political setup today and to look at it through a gender perspective, I would say, well, we have the low representation of women in politics. So that is just an example of how you know look at issues through the eyes of gender.
Okay, let me start from where.
And that's what my book is talking about. Really.
Okay, we'll come to the book, but you just mentioned something that people talk about every day, and I could also remember that. There was a time a woman was also offered herself as a presidential candidate in one of the parties several years ago. There was a primary in Abuja, and a whole lot of women were also there, where naturally you think she should have had the support of women coming from. But when the votes were counted, yeah, she had only one, which means she only voted for herself. So you want to say, when it comes to gender issue, where women should be in forefront and they are not yet in forefront, are women not the enemies of women?
Well, that is often said, but I don't believe in that. We don't really, I know you're referring to Sarah Jubril.
Yeah.
We don't really know what happened at the time. Some of her compatriots were saying later on that she hadn't really expressed herself properly in her political vision. And so that counted against her. You know that politics really is at the grassroots level. It was felt that perhaps a lot of work was not done on her side at the time, and so she didn't. When you need to garner support of your fellow women, and that wasn't done. So that's what was responsible.
So can we now say, from your analysis, from your research, and from your experience, and from the indices we can point to now, yes, do you think women, I'm not saying they are not capable, they are very capable, are ready to take the mantle of leadership if given the opportunity? We have always been ready. Women have always been ready. It's just that the barriers that are placed in front of us are quite high. And then you find out that, for instance, you know that a lot of our politics actually is money-based. And so women do not have that financial purse to pursue and prosecute successfully on the political field as opposed to her male compatriots. So it's not that we're not ready. We have capacity and we have capability, but it's just that these barriers that, and also, our political system is quite different from what you have in other countries. You have to know the leaders, you have to do certain things, meetings are held at night, a lot of things count against a female aspirant. So it's not as if to say we're not capable and we don't have the capacity. So I think that if we have laws in place, for instance, that say, look, you must produce a certain number of women on your candidates list, that would then help women, because that's what we have in other countries. You were once in the threshold of politics. I don't know whether you are still there anyway, also for what I know, to be a special assistant, because that is an appointment, and of course, to some extent, you must have a little bit of politics in you. Now, how naturally, how easy it is for a woman to cope. Primarily, you are the king or the queen of the home, and at times when it comes to family issue, the queen is almost having more power than the king. And I'm not talking about women taking care of the family. How is it? How easy is it for women to cope with family issues, the hobby, the children, and for those who are in politics?
If you have the support of your spouse, that's very important, so that you are able to share the time out between looking after the children, coping with your full-time job, and also facing your political vision. So support in the home is very important, and that is what a lot of our women need. A lot of the women who have been able to get ahead have support in the home, not only just from the spouse, but also from your family members that understand that you have a vision and you want to contribute to your community. So that support is key as we are queens in our homes.
All right, I said earlier on while I was introducing our guest, Agunbiade, she's a writer, and she has just written a book, e-book to be precise, Imagine from the Margins, Women Experiences in Colonial and Contemporary Nigerian History. That's the title of the book. Imagine from the Margins, Women Experiences in Colonial and Contemporary Nigerian History. She's here. I saw a little, at least I went through the book, and I know that you are passionate about women. That's why I said gender analysis, even though you said looking at women, looking at men. But this book, going by the way of gender analysis, is practically talking about women, the challenges they are in, what they have been through, and it is based on research. Now, tell us, what is your objective while conceptualizing this book?
Well, this book actually happened, I just stumbled across some information. I went to the archives at the University of Ibadan for a totally different project. And while waiting for the material I had ordered for, I saw some old newspapers dating back to 1944. And when I went through them, I saw some information, some news reports about Onyeko Abayomi, about a political party she had set up way back in 1944. And as I continued flipping through the paper in 1945, I thought, well, here's all these, activities that women have done, Nigerian women have done way back in the 40s, and nobody has heard about it. We don't know much about what we've done. So I thought, why don't I focus on this and compile all this information into a book and see and put it out there, to elevate women's voices, to show what women have done in the past, and to see why we are where we are at today. It will interest you to know that some of the things that our women were saying in the 1940s still exist today. And these are things we need to talk about. So I thought this book really should trigger conversation around gender in this country. Why do we not have, same number of women as men in our political setup, for instance? Why do we continue to have a male monopoly on our state institutions? So these are the issues that this book really talks about, and also seeks to elevate the voices of women along the way.
I also saw the foreword written by Senator
Biodun
Olujimi.
That's correct.
Yes, Biodun Olujimi. And I know that, this is really a women affair, so to say. Anyway, if you are able to if you read this book, what should the women be happy? Or what do you think the women will be happy about with this your book? And what is in the book that will trigger the men to be more accommodating? And of course, to give more opportunity, to be less domineering. Anyway, let me put it that way. To be less domineering from what I read in the book. What should trigger them, and what will encourage the women in this book?
Well, first of all, I want to stress that this book is for everyone.
Yeah, sure, I know.
Okay. Now, I have drawn a pathway all the way from 1922, and I stress 1922 because that was when the British colonial masters introduced the principle of elective representation, and the electoral guidelines that were rolled out at the time said only men could vote. And so we had all of that until the 1950s, 1954, when it was just men that could vote in federal elections, and women in the local, Lagos Town Council elections were allowed to vote. So when women read this book, they will be able to have an understanding of why we are where we are at, and perhaps that will trigger a different approach in seeking to be part of the public institutions in our country. For example, women were not allowed to participate in constitution writing, and we know that when Murtala Muhammad came in 1975, he set up what was called the Constitution Drafting Committee, and there were no women, 49 wise men. I did a whole chapter on that. They were called the 49 wise men, a whole chapter on that, and there were no women involved in that particular exercise. And that really has been our story up to the last Constitution Conference in 2014, where we have women on the sidelines. Women are part of the delegates, but in the inner body, where they set up subcommittees on devolution, on local government, on resource allocation, you find that the women are not part of those, core subcommittees within the constitutional rights conversation that is going on. So those are the issues that I have brought out in the book. And when women read a lot of the statistics and the data going back in history, it should interest them, and they begin to trigger interest in politics, and they'll probably have a different mindset on how to step out and what to say. Because if a female aspirant comes out today and she's asked, so why do you want to participate in politics? She should be able to say, oh, I am aware that 1940 this is what happened, 1950 this is what happened, and I want to make a difference. As for our men, I just think that when our men read it, they will understand and see that, look, men cannot continue to have a hold on our state institutions. Without due respect to them, they cannot continue to have a hold on our political system. There's just this imbalance, and women form like 49.5% of our population. Yet there's an imbalance, and it's just not fair any longer that we should keep quiet and not say we want to stake a claim in our country. We're not an interest group. We shouldn't be treated like an interest group. We have interests. But women should not, as half of the population, should not be treated as an interest group. So those are the things that I talk about in the book, and I hope that everyone would learn from it.
Do we have any particular chapter? I saw that from the wise men that you talked about. I saw it, I read it, I was laughing. And I think, do you have a particular chapter there? Even though most of these chapters are based on what you came across, what spurred you, the research you went through, then that's why we have the colonial, the experiences of the colonial era, and of course the contemporary Nigerian history. But do we have a particular chapter that was actually spurred by maybe personal experience or experience around you that came handy while you were writing this book?
There's a chapter there called the letter of application. It was written by a lady in 1922. She sought employment in the civil service, and that letter sparked off a whole conversation between the colonial servants. They were sending memos and letters to each other, trying to decide whether they should employ, as they called at the time, African women. And that's the sort of experience a lot of us, as when we were younger, experienced. When we're seeking employment, and we find out that a lot of the places may say, look, they have a sort of underground policy that if you are they don't want to employ women because women will go off and get married, and then the place is vacant, or they're going off to look after their children, they're taking days off and all of that. So a lot of us had that experience growing up. And this letter, when I read the lady's letter and the correspondence that then followed, it reminded me of when I was young, seeking employment as a young journalist, just fresh out of school, young graduate, just fresh out of school. And that letter also shows that the mindset of the colonial masters at the time, they were debating, should we employ women, African women, or should we not? They went to the extent of even saying, look, there are some jobs that mean that women will supervise men, and that is not allowed.
Okay, people will be listening now, watching now, will be wondering, how do they get copies, or how does an individual get a copy of this book? I know I have one. It's an e-book. What is the difference between e-book and of course the one we are used to? How do people now subscribe if they want to get to have copies of this book or read this book? Then maybe I should just start from there. Do we have any chance of this e-book becoming a hardcover later on that people can easily get access to, even though we know that we are driving towards the internet now, no big deal. But this is Nigeria. It's not as vibrant as some other parts of the world. So are you worried? I hope you, okay, let me start. How do we get copies of this book?
Okay, thank you for asking that question. This book is an e-book at the first instance. I have every intention to have a hard copy out sometime this year. And so subscribers should please go to my, by the way, it's on amazing.com. And then you can also go to my website, tayoagunbiade.com. Okay. So you have two options, either my website, like I said.
tayoagunbiade.com.
Yes, tayoagunbiade.com is my website where I have all my works, all my writings I've done over many years. And then you can order through there, or you can go to Amazon. Amazing.com is there as well.
So very easy, tayoagunbiade.com or amazing.com.
Yes.
Then you get there, you'll be prompted.
Yes.
And of course you get to have copies of this book. Yeah, let's go ahead. I think I also asked, okay, you have also answered that.
Yes, that I have plans to publish a hard copy later in the year. And so it will be on our bookshelves both here and abroad.
Are you satisfied with the level for now? Has it gone down, or are we just still shaking of reading culture? Because once you have a society with less reading culture, the intention of your writer might not be met, because for the intention to be met and for what the intended purpose of a book to be met is for people of that society to read it. And if you are not reading widely, how do we get there? What is the problem? What has been the problem? Or do you say you're satisfied with the reading culture?
No, I'm not. Thank you for bringing that up. No, I'm not. We're not a reading society. I'm sorry. we're not. And we need to improve. And we can start with our young children. I know that there are lots of book clubs out there that are encouraging our children to read. We need to read, and then we need to know what we're reading, because it's one thing to read, and then what are you reading? So history is one of the things we need to read. And this book is a historical book. It's a historical narration, 14 chapters, delving into history. So we need to read, and we need to read history. And I think that in our schools really need to focus more on reading with our children, at that young level, from the nursery to the primary, to, instill that discipline of reading. It's so important, because it's when you read that you're able to, go into your own world and come up with ideas and concepts, because you have read, and it helps you to.
Mr. Agunbiade, why did we get it wrong? I was once a very young guy too, and I could remember the number of books. It was like a competition. At times you get a 800-page book, and you must finish it that day. Apart from your academic work, you must, because another person is waiting to grab it from you.
Yeah, that's true.
And when we go to rent books, you return it the second day. You must finish it that day. But all of a sudden, is it because there are not too many books to attract the young ones that we have? Because then there were enough books for us to read. And of course, don't just go to the library. I know it's a
well,
problem.
I was going to say the libraries. We need to. Our public libraries are a disaster all over the country, and we need to address that problem, because there's really no attraction to go into the library to read, to sit and read. We need to restock our libraries, and maybe that's where the private sector will come in and assist, because I know government cannot do it all. And then even at the home level, as parents, we should encourage our children to read. Not only just rely on school books, but just general interest books to encourage our children. So it's for the government has a role. At home we have a role, and our libraries also. We really just need to do something about our libraries.
Shouldn't we move away from the all the norms, so to say? Nowadays, a child as little as 5, 6, 7 could go on the net and of course do anything with the phone. And so if that is the norm now, can't we integrate the issue of making people interested in reading through e-books, so that yes, they won't want to flipper with phones here and there now? Why don't we have a way of actually making them have interest, and of course having enough books that will interest them also online, like what you are doing now?
Well, you know that the level of access to the internet also is a problem in our country, in Africa in general. So if we say, we want to say, okay, we want everybody to go online and start to read books, we know it's a gradual process. I would still say the hard copies of books is where we should keep our focus on for now, because you know that difficulties paying for data to have access to the internet, you know, that's not the problem of most of our parents today. But I think that if government, for instance, decides to focus on our libraries, our schools, our primary schools must have libraries. Our secondary schools must have. When I was in secondary school, I went to Methodist Girls High School. You know, we had a period we called reading period, library period. You must go to the library and borrow a book, spend that period of time being in the library. So if we can bring those kinds of things back into our school, primary schools and secondary schools, I think that would be a good thing, particularly at the primary school level. I don't know how many of our state primary schools have libraries that are functioning. If we now start to say we want to go into saying, okay, go online and all of that, you know, there's the issue of electricity, the issue of computers and all of that. So that's a different ball game. So Wi-Fi and all of that costs money. So I think we can invest in our libraries and restock our libraries. And you know, the private sector, private citizens can actually come in there to assist in, you know, you adopt a school, adopt a library.
What does how do I put it now? Reading widely, being a vibrant reader, what does it make one?
Oh, it makes you knowledgeable. You know, you are current, you're knowledgeable, you're topical, then you have ideas. You know, you can you are innovative and imaginative. It fires your imagination. If you read widely, your imagination is fired up, and you're innovative. You come up with ideas, you come up with concepts, because you've developed all this intellectual knowledge, and you've been able to, you know, process it and come up with your own ideas. So it's important that we read widely, and it's important that we know what we're reading, you know, because there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of poisonous stuff, and so, you know, you need to know what it is that you're reading.
So where does the inspiration come from as a writer for Tayo Agunbiade?
Oh, for me, I'd like to see a better world, really, for myself, for my children, for my community. So that's what inspires me to write. And you know, in this my retirement years, as I like to call my years, I'd like to see better circumstances for women in our country. You know, we have so much vibrancy, so much energy, capacity, capability. So we should be given the opportunities to, you know, contribute better to our communities.
How do you relax? What are your hobbies? Are you a music person? Are you a social person?
Oh yes, I am. I'm a disco queen. I like the old school. I have about 300 sounds on my phone. I love old music. You know, not what we listen to today, but the philosophical music of them days, if I can call it that, the Michael Jackson days.
The good old days.
The good old days. Yeah, the days of Michael Jackson and, you know, other artists of those years, the 70s. And I think they call them old school today. So I love that music. So that's what I relax with, apart from writing.
All right. As we wrap up this segment of the interview, Mrs. Tayo Agunbiade, a former special assistant to Dr. Daniel on information, a writer now and gender analyst who are just chunked out a book on the net. He has told you we can get it from, if you want to actually be part of those of us who are reading the book, Imagine. From the margins, women experiences in colonial and contemporary Nigerian history. So where do you say we can get it again?
From my website, tayoagunbiade.com, and from amazing.com. It's already loaded there, so you can order from either two. It's just 5,000 naira.
Okay.
It's now, quite affordable.
As you go, what would be your final message to women? Because you are tilted towards women, and of course from what that you have said, even this book is meant to spur women to actually stand on their own. So what will be your message as we go?
Well, my message, Hakim, my message is for men and for women, that please let us look at society and have fairness in society. Let us embrace our women. Let us embrace the capacity and capability of our women, and have an understanding that we have come from so far and there's so much we can contribute. If you look at the book, we have those that I've referred to as the early feminists, and they did so much. The likes of Funai Ransom Kuti, Margaret Echo, Gambo Sawaba, Malama Shehu.
Okay.
You know, they did so much in their day, and there's so much we also can do, but we need to be given that space. And so our men should let us into that legislative space, into that political space, and allow us to function as true citizens of this country.
Thank you very much once again. I want to thank Tayo Agunbiade. It's been a revealing session with her. Never disappointed. There were the few occasions I had to interview her or bring her on a program, and today has not been an exception. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Hakeem.
All right, we want to wrap up the program. That should be the end of the program. But of course, we will not go without hitting you with the pick of the week and the pick